broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good afternoon or good morning, depending upon your time zone. I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief in SD Times, and I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Java 10 and Beyond, Keeping Up with the Language and Planning for the Future. As we've been reporting in SD Times, Java 10 was made available in March as the first offering under Oracle's new twice-yearly release schedule. The release emphasized cloud and serverless computing, but, as we'll learn in today's webinar, it also impacts developer tools, speed of development, and application modernization. So before we get started, I have a couple of brief housekeeping announcements. First, today's program will be followed by a live Q&A. You can ask a question at any time during the program by locating the question bar in your control panel, typing in a question and hitting submit, and we'll get to as many as time allows. If we don't get to your question, fear not, we will try to answer all of them after the program offline. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand on sdtimes.com very soon. You'll get an email telling you when that will happen. Now, with us today to discuss how your development teams can keep up with the changes in Java, with an eye towards the future as well, are Rod Cope, Chief Technology Officer at RogueWave Software, and Tom Romer, Chief Technology Officer at Java Tools company Zero Turnaround, which is now also a RogueWave company. Rod was the founder and CTO of OpenLogic, which was acquired by RogueWave, and he has more than 20 years experience in software development. He's spoken at numerous industry conferences, received the Java 1 Conference Rockstar Award 3 years in a row. Tom co-founded Zero Turnaround, which is the company behind tools such as JRebel, XRebel, and XRebel APN. His experience with Java goes back to the 1.4 days and ranges from bytecode level JVM instrumentation to developing distributed enterprise Java applications. And now to get things kicked off, here's Tom Romer.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dave, for the intro. Great to be here. Haven't been on a webinar for some time, and happy to be just after another Java release. So on our agenda today will be the just a short overview of Java, the history of Java versions, and then we'll go into the Java 10 and beyond from there. We have prepared a bunch of different discussion topics that me and Rod will cover, and hopefully from those discussion topics we can take away something useful for everyday decisions now that a lot has changed in the ecosystem. And as Dave mentioned, we'll follow up with a questions and answers session. And actually, before we get started, we do have a quick poll about the different Java versions. So the question is, what is the latest JDK version that you're currently using? And here as options, we have Java 7, Java 8, Java 9, and Java 10. We'll give you probably 10-15 seconds more to answer, and then we'll check the result to understand better how everyone listening to this is using the Java language. Aha. So we can see that 1/5 is on Java 7, and actually only 10% is Java 9 and 10, and the rest is Java 8. So about 2/3 is on Java 8, which is kind of what I expected. Rod, what was your expectation here?
Yeah, I think that kind of fits, Tom. I'm actually interested to see 6% already on Java 10. So we've got some real go-getters and experimenters on the line. So we better be on our toes today.
Yeah, I've actually used Java 10 also, so I might have answered the same even. But all right, let's get into the quick Java history overview. So here I've started with Java 5, which was a big release with a lot of language and API changes that came out about 14 years ago, and then followed up with quite many versions. And from the years, you can see that this was back in the days where Java was released whenever the next Java was ready. So there wasn't any real cadence in there. There's like we can see 2 years, then we can see 5 years. Ra, do you remember why there's such a long gap between Java 6 and 7?
Yeah, there was a Solaris eclipse in there somewhere, right?
Exactly. This is where Sun Microsystems was acquired by Oracle. After that, the releases got on pace again, and I think Java 9 is this big latest kind of just before this quick cadence of 6 months that happened last September, and this was a huge change. The platform changed a lot. I still remember it. It took us over here almost a year to prepare a JRule for this release, and then mainly because of this module system change. So this is like the history, but let's look at the future. So with Java 10, not just the changes to the platform and language, but the biggest change is definitely how the cadence of the releases is affected. So Java 10 packs about, I think, 12 Java enhancement proposals. Here I've only brought out this var type, something where this local type inference that lets you type less, and the second point I have this strict 6 month release cadence. So I'm actually leaving a lot out, but and the same is true for Java 11, where we mentioned that the biggest changes being the Java FX being decoupled from the JDK, and some old stuff is removed. But actually, we're going to follow up this this webinar with a blog post with Java 11 and beyond, where we go into detail about quite low level changes and updates. But in this webinar, one of the main things we'll focus on is the strict 6 month release cadence, and actually let's actually go into that. Couple of points about this changes. So how we've got here is that after the announce of Java 10 during the Java 9 and the new release cadence, there have been numerous articles around the web about the changes happening, and I think one of the main shockers have been like there won't be any public release for Oracle JDK after Java 10. So it's a big change, but luckily there are other options out there, so that's fine. But still, I think it's one of the biggest changes. Another one is that when you saw in the Java history slide, you could see that the different versions were a couple of years apart. That used to be this cadence, and now there's something that follows that cadence, like in a similar way, and this is this long-term support releases. So every 3 years from Oracle, there's going to be an LTS release, which Oracle will support for a longer time. But just a reminder, with the previous point, the Oracle JDK won't have public releases. You need to have a subscription to their commercial offering to get this. And the next LTS is Java 11. Of course, you can get the Open JDK and then the other options. So we're here just talking about the Oracle JDK. On top of the every 3 years, there's actually happening 2 releases per year called feature releases, March and September. It just happens that the next feature release will be a LTS. From here, again, the same is true that the public releases that you can get your hands on without the subscription is mainly OpenJDK. And to talk about the other options, so there's Adopt OpenJDK, which is a community-driven project with actually big name sponsors like IBM. AdoptOpenJDK.net. You can download the OpenJDK builds there that have gone through the test suite. You can actually download the IBM J9 from there, and on top of that, they promise a 4-year long-term support for their builds whenever the LTS build happens, which is like really nice. So another offering is from Azul Systems. Azul, actually, I think from the vendors has taken the most energy and effort to talk about how they will go forward with Java. They have defined not just long time support, but medium time support and short time support, which you can see more closely from following slide. And also there's an offering from Roguewave. So I think here, Rod, maybe you want to talk about the OpenLogic JDK support a little bit more.
Yeah, Tom. So Roguewave has the OpenLogic brand is the company I founded. I've been part of Roguewave for 5 years, and we've been supporting kind of the largest enterprises in the world on a lot of different open source packages for the last 12 or so years. And OpenJDK is a big one for us for a lot of these reasons, that it's difficult to find support, or it can be really expensive from Oracle, for example. So a lot of customers just want to have one place to go for supporting all the open source that they're deploying in the enterprise, and we can help with that. And so for the Open JDK, we've been supporting latest major 4 versions, which goes back to basically Java 6 at this point. So it's quite a number of years back. Now, as the cadence speeds up, of course, some of those will drop off the back end. We'll be supporting Java 7, for example, in later in the near future. And we'll have to look at adoption in our enterprise customer base to see how many versions enterprises need support on. Obviously, they can stay in production a very long time. Usually once an app is running, people don't want to play with it. They just want it to work as is and get support. And so we help with that as opposed to having kind of strict time frames, for example. So we'll see how that plays out in enterprise adoption.
All right. I think it's just like really helpful to have as many players and options out there as possible, taking into account the changes that are happening. So here we have a graph that's heavily inspired by the similar graph from Azul, and a table that's under the Oracle support news page. And here on the y-axis, we have starting from Java 7 until Java 18 going. And on the x-axis from left to right, we have the years, and we're around there. So 2018, April, and Java 10 is out. And there are a couple of important things here to note, is that as these different bars, like green being OpenJDK, yellow Oracle Public, red Oracle Extended, the gray Adopt OpenJDK, and blue Azul, Azul Enterprise, you can see that after this Java 10, starting with Java 11, you don't see the yellow anymore. And this is where there won't be any Oracle Public releases. So you need to have some sort of subscription from them. Secondly, when you look at the feature releases, so these are this 6 months, this short bars. You see that when a bar ends, then you don't see any overlap with another bar, with the exception of Azul. So Azul actually has addressed this by having overlap with their short-term releases and medium-term releases. But for any other, the only overlap you get is from the LTS releases. So there's no overlap in support for feature releases. Once one ends, the other one starts. Kind of scary. Most of the long-term support is also commercial, with the exception of Adopt OpenJDK. So this is the new reality in the Java landscape. And hopefully this makes it more clear. And now you might have all kinds of questions. So I just wrote a couple of down here, like which version of Java should I use as of today, or which vendor, and what about production? What about development environment? How should I upgrade? All of those things. And then what we have done here is that me and Rod have prepared a couple of sample scenarios that we want to walk through and then just have a discussion as how should you decide in certain situations. We have made a couple of assumptions. Generally, we believe that it's best to develop and run an app with the same JVM version and vendor. Background here is that it's just less surprises across the board. You will get less, it works on my machine, or it doesn't work on this machine. Another one is developers mostly like newer versions. When you talk amongst yourself, usually it's more about new features. So here I've written down for reasons, because actually different people have different reasons why they like the latest and greatest. At the same time, ops people like battle-tested versions. And they're actually optimizing their sleep, so they can sleep better when they run stuff with battle-tested versions. And the first scenario that we prepared is maintaining mature applications. So here we use the word mature. We didn't want to use legacy. So by mature, we mean that the application has been in development, it's already in production, it's adding value to someone, it's useful, and it's also actively maintained and developed. And so just imagine that you're in charge, or you're developing one of these type of applications. And the first scenario I want to walk through is this: if you actually start operating the JVM regularly. And Rod, imagine this scenario, and then you take this approach of upgrading it regularly, and then there's this quick pace cycle happening now. Like, why would you even upgrade regularly?
Well, that is a good question. A lot of mature apps, people try not to upgrade. They do their best to leave things alone and change the minimum amount of infrastructure while adding new features. But at some point, you recognize that you can't stay on an old version forever. You need security patches. Maybe there are major issues or kind of corner cases with an older JVM or JDK, and you want something new from the new version that's come out. Could be a feature, could be stability, could be performance, could be less memory usage, or other reliability concerns that help an active in production mature application. So as you kind of show on the slide, moving to something that's more actively maintained, that the industry is putting more effort into, is usually a safer choice in the long run. So you may not update every 6 months, of course, it's probably more likely that you're looking at every other year maybe, or possibly beyond. But some reasonable cadence where you can gain the benefits but not be too distracted by maybe lack of tooling support or something like that in a really new version.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of
Any other reasons?
Other reasons that come to mind, you know, there are a bunch. One is to keep developers interested, right? Kind of a morale building thing when they can not only be involved in language they prefer, Java, in doing what they like, but also get some new excitement to play with some new things over time, try out new APIs, and keep their kind of environment fresh, as opposed to getting too stale and maybe being tempted by other environments and ecosystems like Node.js and things like that. So keeping up is important for those reasons. Just retain and keep your developers happy.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to look at the investment a little. So one of the things that Java is usually gets a lot of kudos and positive feedback is its backwards compatibility. At the same time, very often what's kind of forgotten is that it's not just the Java backwards compatibility that's important. So for example, here, if you upgrade the JVM regularly, it's not just the JVM. To take advantage of new Java versions, as we all saw with Java 8, 9, 10, is that you will be actually waiting for the tooling to start supporting the new Java version. So even when Java 9 comes out, or Java 9 came out, you actually need an IDE that supported the new features. And the same is with Java 10, this even this var example that I brought out, like your IDE has to support it to actually take advantage of it, and IDE not going crazy. Or I think the same is with like build tools. You need to make sure that your build tools are up to date and they work with the latest version. The same is for frameworks and libraries. Even your monitoring tools, like when a new Java version hits the streets, it doesn't mean that your APM, your profiler, whatnot works with the new version. And imagine your production system where you have those nicely crafted JVM flags that are just optimal for your solution. And now, I know the perm gen is gone and the flags are obsolete, or a new GC is default, and all of those things. So whenever people mention this backwards compatibility, this little face comes to mind. Like, yes, it's true for Java, but or like most of the time it's true for Java. There's so many other aspects to think about. Okay, Rod, but let's take the other approach. So we won't be upgrading the JVM regularly. We'll take a more conservative approach. Any aspects, topics you want to mention here?
Yeah, Tom. So I guess if it's a very mature legacy app, maybe it's bringing in a lot of money for your company, and you don't want to invest too much in new feature development. You may want things to be more static. So, the danger there is that you can fall pretty far behind and be on a very old version. The good side there is that you can find help, at least either from the community or from a vendor. Typically, you'll have to pay more to support a really old version that everybody's moved on from. But you can get support. Now, of course, you may run into compatibility issues with the frameworks, components, libraries you're using, that they stop supporting the old version you're on. and it's hard to get security updates and patches and things. So danger is don't fall too far behind, or you may be stuck and can't move anything forward, and then you're in kind of a security nightmare. So pay attention and not get too far behind.
It kind of reminds me of this Equifax, where I think the official response was that the some framework wasn't upgraded. I think struts or something. Although there was a security advisory out there, a new version out there. So besides having a policy with the JVM upgrades, you actually have to look at the frameworks and libraries from the same lens, like they're just as important as the JVM upgrade itself.
Yeah, exactly. And just looking at the time, I think we will pick up the pace a little bit and get into some of the newer stuff pretty quickly. So a couple last key points on this is, it may not be the most exciting thing for developers, but mature apps that work, sometimes you do just want them to keep working and not put a ton of new development in. And that can be okay, again, as long as you don't fall too far behind. And minimally keep up with the ecosystem. Really, the key points are security, vulnerabilities, keeping up with those proactively, and recognizing that you're going to miss out on some bug fixes in some cases if you don't have either the right vendor support or can't keep up a new enough version for the community to be interested in it.
Okay, but let's look at another scenario. So starting a new project today. And so let's say there's a scenario. This project will be in active development for 2 years. You believe that the project will have a maintenance window of 10 years. And now we're presented with some tough questions. Like, let's start with which Java version to paste this off of. Rod, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so maybe I'm somewhat aggressive and optimistic, but I would pick the very latest, right? I'm fresh out of the oven version, and realize that if I'm going to develop for a couple years and maintain for 10 years, even by the time I get done with my development, there will be another 2 or 3 versions of Java out there. So I don't want to fall too far behind. So even though it might feel safer to pick a more mature version, I would tend towards picking the latest and greatest, although of course you do have to worry about tool support and things like that. That's where I would come down.
So you would actually go with Java 10 if we would start this project today?
Yeah, I would, and I would be very tempted to grab 11 as soon as it's available, because again, knowing that you're going to be on it for quite a while, start with the most recent you can get now, and it'll already be getting a little old by the time you're in production.
Yeah, I think that's a safe approach, but okay, so let's grab Java 10. But next question is which vendor to go with?
Well, I'm obviously biased, but because we've been doing this for over a dozen years now with a lot of large customers and enterprises in all different industries, I think it's good to choose a vendor that supports not just one piece of open source, but your whole environment, so you don't get finger pointing and in issues where you're talking to a vendor that feels like they need to defend the technology. Instead, it's better to go with one that's truly objective, that is okay with any choice you make, and there's kind of one throat to choke if anything goes wrong in the entire environment, not just with one bit. So that's again, I'm biased, but I think that's the right choice for most enterprises.
Okay, and the last question is which upgrade policy to choose? So we have this new fast-paced cadence. How often would you actually upgrade your Java version?
So if it's new environment, new application, likely time to market is one of my biggest concerns. I've got, I'm looking at the analyst reports and watching the market and seeing development times get shorter and shorter every year. You've got to get your new feature out. You've got to support your business. as quickly as possible. So with speed being a high priority, I think you need to adopt those new language features more quickly so you can get those advantages over the competition that's still using older versions and fewer features. So for me, I would upgrade more frequently and aggressively take advantage of the new power language gives me. Maybe that's every year. It could even be more like every 6 months in the beginning of development where you can still move very fluidly. And all of this is predicated on having really good agile processes and automated tests and taking advantage of open source, et cetera, so that you can feel comfortable that when you upgrade something, your test will tell you if there's going to be problems, even with high load and corner cases, and that's not something that your customers are going to need to tell you once it's in production. So if you've got that in place, you can move faster safely.
Yeah, I think that's the same approach I would take. Faster pace in the beginning, and then once it goes into production, having something more conservative. Okay, let's look at another scenario. So imagine application deployment and support, whether you're a vendor of some software that you distribute to your end users, or you just have to take care of application deployment and supporting it. Again, the same questions arise, like so you're developing an app that you ship to a customer. Which minimal JDK should it support?
Well, if you don't have control over that entire environment, which is often the case if you have a large enterprise customer base, then you need to be prepared to support what the enterprise feels comfortable with. And a lot of times that means dealing with IT departments that are more comfortable on the, as you said, the battle-tested versions, the older versions that have kind of been through the wars and come out okay. So that probably means you're looking at Java 7, maybe 8 if you can get away with it, but certainly not the newer stuff. Now, if you have a much smaller customer base, or maybe they don't really care about what versions of Java is required, or maybe you can even ship your own JRE, for example, then maybe you could be more aggressive. But again, large customers, you really have to fit them as opposed to the other way around.
Okay, but the other side of the coin, like which latest JDK should you support? So 10 is out, there's going to be 11 out, you're shipping your stuff, your minimal version is, let's say, 7 or 8. What about the new versions that are constantly popping up?
Well, I think the good news there, if you're developing and maintaining software, you don't really have to support the very latest and greatest because your customers probably haven't moved to it either. And even if they have, it's going to be in small pockets and probably not on a global basis or something that ops would mandate. So I would think you want to support JDK 9 is maybe as far as you need to go right now. And I think it'd be okay to lag behind a couple versions as the pace speeds up. I think that'll be fine.
Yeah, I feel so too. And the software that we distribute in this manner, I think we're still on Java 7, so it's very similar what you said here. And yes, another option is to ship the JRE, and to some extent it will always work, except when the customer wants to be in charge of all the security updates for the JRE, wants to be in charge of all the JVM flags and all of those things. But if it's a not such a mission critical part of business, then you might get away with just shipping a JRE and then whichever flags you have, you have. All right, let's look at another scenario, which is about the best practices to move the microservices. And actually, before we start with this topic, let's have our second poll question. All right, so the question is, are you using microservices? Yes, developing them now. Yes, in production with them already. No, but I'm interested. No way, go away. All right, let's give everyone a little bit time to actually answer to this one.
Yeah, I think this will be an interesting one, Tom. Everybody's talking about them, so we'll give our take on the response. But it'll be interesting to see how reality matches up with the theory and the interest.
My assumption is not too many, but we'll see. So yes, about half said no, but interested, and 1/5 are in production, and 1/4 is actually developing them right now. So it's actually more pro microservices than I actually assumed.
Yeah,
okay, but let's
I was gonna say I'm a little surprised by the people already have it in production. That's
yes, same here. Yeah. Okay, but let's look at this topic, and okay, this slide doesn't show that well, but what it does say up there is best practices to move the microservices. So let me go back, and we'll need to fix that later on. So here, microservices is a trend that's moving really quickly. There's constantly happening improvements in virtualization, containerization, changes, new versions in tooling, provisioning, orchestration. The same is true for frameworks and microservices. There are actually, like, every month you can read some new approach or some change. So it's moving so fast that if you start thinking about what should I do with my Java version, then I think the answer there is quite simple. Rod, I think you also wanted to comment on this, the change that the microservices have brought with the transition of or a change in responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that tweet that is on the screen there is a great example. You realize you've got a problem. We went from basically one server instance, pretty simple to understand. Now we have 30 smaller Docker containers with a bunch of different things running on them. And it's not inherently good or bad for that change to take place from the monolithic to the microservices, as long as the architecture fits the application in the need. Where people get into trouble, I think, with microservices is to think it's a panacea and everything will be simple. It does simplify a lot of things, but people tend to maybe overlook how dramatic the change is on the operations side when you go from one thing to understand, even if it's a big thing, to lots of moving parts that all need to coordinate and act semi-independently. And no matter how you slice it with DevOps and automation, you've still got a lot of moving parts to manage. So everybody needs to be on the same page. And the example of the tweet with Java, we had a 1 gig app, and now we've got 30 times almost a half a gig. So the explosions can happen, and it's possible to need more hardware rather than less if you're not pretty careful on the explosion of parts sometimes.
Yeah, I think here when we think about the Java versions and I think the high pace here is well aligned with the high pace of microservices. So here, like, our advice is to keep upgrading your Java, because if the other technologies are changing, the demands are changing. So for example, Java 9 and Java 10 brought this improved container awareness, where actually Java understands that you're running in a container with limited either RAM, CPU, or something, and certain things I believe were also backward to Java 8, so that Java could be run in a container. But just imagine all the changes happening in the microservices trend. If you want to keep up with them, you just need to keep upgrading your Java too.
Sure, and like you mentioned earlier, some of the new things I think in 11 are decoupling some parts and removing some old older technologies aren't used. And of course, for microservices, you want to be as small and light as possible for memory footprint and overhead. And so as Java keeps evolving and hopefully continues to shrink and become more efficient, that's, as you say, another reason to keep up and to upgrade more quickly than you would normally expect to in a more mature or monolithic app.
Yes. All these modules and stuff is also moving in the same direction. Now that we've gone over the mature apps, starting a new project, application deployment and support, and then now the microservices, and then what's the take with Java 10? Maybe we can come up with like a couple of conclusions. So Java is moving at a really fast pace now, and the thing that has changed now is that you actually need to keep up with it, and you need to have a solid plan there. And not upgrading is an option, but it's still something that has to be a thought-through plan, because you need to get your security updates, just not for the JDK, not just for the JVM, but also for your frameworks and libraries. So it needs to be like a conscious decision. Another thing is that with this Oracle JDK not being available to everyone anymore, there's no more public releases. Although it has been true up to this point too that there are other vendors out there, but it's now even more important that you know that you have a choice. There are many options on the market, and again, you just need to make some decisions. Rod, do you want to add anything to the conclusions here?
Well, I think you really nailed it there when you said make some decisions. I think people need to be more proactive now than they were in the past about what is the strategy for their particular app or portfolio of apps. Do we kind of lag and stay on the older mature versions as long as we can, or are we moving to keep up with maybe the open source components in our stack, and they actually require us to upgrade because the community doesn't want to support an unlimited number of Java versions for their own, QA matrix purposes. So whatever your decision is, just think about it and make one. In the old days, you could kind of get away with not really deciding because you had years and years in between releases. Now, you need to decide more quickly, and that means potentially keeping up with all the other versions of the things in your stack, the frameworks and libraries that depend on particular versions of Java. Now you need to react more quickly for that too. So the real key is think about it. No decision becomes more difficult than it used to be.
Yeah. I'm personally a lazy person. I really love the part where you get to make this decision like every 3 years, and then now it's actually on your plate today. But thank you, Rod. And I think let's move to questions and answers section. Let's see, where's my cursor? Yes.
Okay, that was a fine presentation. We'll move to the questions. I want to remind the attendees that they can, ask a question at any time just by typing it into the control panel and hitting submit. But let me just follow up on one of the thoughts, and this was a question that one of our attendees asked as well, and that is, what does a lack of public releases from Oracle mean to the stability, consistency, and longevity of the language? And further, is it correct to understand that there's a danger, again, of splintering of Java?
I can probably start with it. I'm not personally afraid of any big effect to the language itself. I think even so far the language changes, if you follow the mailing list, the CHEPs, GSRs, I think the language, the APIs will be driven very similarly as they have so far. I have attended the past probably 5 years of Java 1. This, of course, this year it won't be called Java 1. There's this architects session where the main leaders of Java language talk, and I haven't gotten the impression that anything there changes. So just not having those Oracle JDK releases might even give Oracle more focus, and putting this more like pressure to just to the community, which is in a way maybe not a nice thing to do, as Oracle definitely has deeper buckets than the community, but I guess they focus on the stuff that that matters to them more, and I think it won't have much of an effect on the language and the APIs. It might be even a good thing. More cycles.
Okay, right. And what about the issue of splintering? I remember that, back in the day, people would talk about Java and they would say people like Sun and IBM and people who had implementations, Oracle, they would cooperate on the standard but compete on the implementation. So we kind of getting back to that kind of a scenario?
Mm-hmm. But here, if you look at the other options out there, so I think when I started working with Java, there was the JRocket, HubSpot, then the IBM implementation. There was a couple of more, I don't remember right now. I think it was more splintered back then. And even now, if you look how the J9 is built, how the Azure stuff is built, then actually OpenJDK is almost everywhere. So it, I believe the platform has come even more together. The only splintering I'm afraid of is I remember when there was this big Python upgrade to I think 2.7 to 3, and what happened was like the most of the stable distros started shipping 2.7. I don't know, maybe even today. I need to check what my Mac default version is. So this is the part that I don't want to see happening to Java. Yes, my latest MacBook here running High Sierra is bundled with Python 2.7, which is old. So I hope Java 8 won't be the default to so many systems in, let's say, 5 or 10 years. So that's the only splintering I'm afraid of.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
If I could
all right, we have a
jump on there.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just going to jump in there real quick and say, maybe this, unfortunately, I'm dating myself, but I started with Java, first had an app in production on Java 102 back in 1996. So I've seen a lot of implementations, and Tom kind of pointed out Python, but the open source community has created a lot of languages over time, from Python and PHP and Perl and Ruby and Node.js, if you want to call that a language, and lots of different flavors of frameworks and languages over time. And occasionally things do splinter, but usually when that happens, they come back together stronger at some point. We had the Node.js split. I guess it's been 2-3 years ago now, and it quickly led to some changes, some improvements, and it came back together as a better community. So it's possible something like that would happen with Java, but in the long term, I think we get more innovation and more input and just an improved ecosystem in general, even though there might be some occasional hiccups.
Right. Very good. All right, we have a lot of questions here. I'll get to as many as the time is going to allow, and I'll try to, maybe if 2 or 3 of them are on the same topic, I'll ask kind of a broader question, and you guys could address that. But going to the microservices and container aspect of Java, one of the attendees wants to know, so what Docker container optimizations have been made in OpenJDK 10?
Mm-hmm. So the one that I can mention off the top of my head is when Java 9 brought this memory awareness, then Java 10 also added like this CPU management, that you actually get the CPU shares that you've given it through your containerization. so that Java is aware of those parts too.
Right.
I think that was the main one. Anything like CPU related, whether CPU shares, quotas, sets, and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if memory stuff was also improved. So actually on the line, we also have Michael Rasmussen, who's the chief architect and team lead for JRebel, who actually knows all the bytecode instructions by heart from left to right and from back to forth. Michael, can you chime in here for any other Java 10 container awareness stuff that was added?
For Java 10 in particular, it was mostly about adhering to the memory limits and the CPU constraints that the container puts. So you covered it all basically.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Dave,
so,
there is one question that I kind of like.
Okay.
This is about this with having all of these changes constantly happening to Java. Will actually developers be able to use all of these new features? And this is kind of like dear to my heart because I'm having trouble keeping up with everything, starting from I guess Java 8. And then my belief here is that for old timers, they won't pick up the new stuff that fast, but the new people will, and they will be excited, but not sure for most of the developers. I don't know, Rod. What's your thought here?
Yeah, I think I'm exactly in line with you, Tom. The guys have been doing Java for 10, 15, 20 years. It's kind of like if you're writing C++ or Ruby or something else for that long, you tend to know what you know and you like the tried and true. Maybe you pick up a feature here and there if it's really powerful, but it's more maybe the younger crowd with the people new to the language that maybe even get pulled into the language from something else because of a new feature that maybe they find that they think Java becomes on parity with some other language of choice they've been using, and then they're ready to take a look or make the leap. And that's what draws them in. But I think that is probably more likely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
maybe we're just these bitter old men.
Well, I know I am. But well, isn't that like that with all technology, where you have the early adopters who are going to want to take the latest and greatest even before they're 100% secure, while you have older guys like us who want to make sure that everything's stable and tested and tried, and then adopt what they need, as opposed to being the guy to rush to the newest and coolest new thing. I think it's an age thing, definitely. So, all right, let me get back to some more of these questions. A lot of them, again, have to do with specific features in Java 10. For instance, one of our attendees wants to know about Spring 5 web flux, and if that keeps pace with Java 10. If you guys have any thoughts on that?
It's Tom here. I have no idea, but Michael, what about you? It's a very specific question, though.
It is.
There wasn't really anything added in Java 10 for that regards, but Java 9 added the Flow API that is also reactive. So you have something in Java as well. And there are things coming later on that will use this API. For instance, the HTTP client that was an incubator in Java 10 is being remodeled. It is using the Flow API and being remodeled slightly, and will be a full feature in Java 11, for instance.
Excellent. All right. Here's another question that I think is interesting. I guess there was a mention of removing Java EE, and so now is it the understanding that Jakarta EE won't support Java 11, or do we not know yet?
So the removal of Java EE, as my understanding is this, it's not the removal of the Java EE. it's not the removal of Java EE project. So Java EE was renamed to this Jakarta. But there's but there's a bunch of those Java EE related classes in the SC that Michael, were they deprecated in Java 9, or how did it work?
With Java 9, they were deprecated. You had to add a specific JVM flag to actually enable them. And Java 11 will just remove them. These are some of the like Java X transaction XA classes and stuff like that that were added in Java 5 and 6, and later on just been, but they're outdated as to current EE specs anyway, so they kind of want to get rid of them, because with the module system it creates, basically you will have the same package 2 places, and that's not allowed in the new module system.
So I think like anyone who's developing EE and gets the EE classes from their whichever app server they use, they won't notice it, because I believe anyways they were using the ones from their app server.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So again, there seems to be in the attendee area a lot of hand wringing and nervousness about the future of Java and what all this means with you know, what's happening with OpenJDK and using that without a vendor and what have you. Generally speaking, somebody wants to know, is the future of Java bright? I mean, is it something people think they're going to be able to rely on consistently going forward?
Probably I'm positive in nature, but overall, I'm still a big fan of Java. I like the stewardship of the language, the platform. It is moving like too fast for me. Like, I personally don't like this approach. I still remember when at this architects session at Java 1, I think Mark Reinhold asked everyone in the crowd, are you happy with the release cadence? Would you want to be faster? And then like almost no one raised a hand. There were like 200 people there. And then a year later, the pace went up. So I think most of Java users have used Java because the pace is slower. They can build like long-term apps that you don't have to figure if you need to upgrade the Java itself during the development. And now it's changing. So that part is scary. But I'm still like very positively minded about it, like positively minded about Java.
Excellent.
Yeah, same here. I think adding the new features also can prevent some people from leaving and looking at other languages and frameworks, and having the innovation kind of get injected back in can draw in some new blood and keep it going for a lot longer. So I think it's a big plus overall.
That's excellent. All right. Well, we're right up against time. So I just want to take a quick second to thank you both, Rod and Tom, for an excellent presentation. Of course, I'd like to thank Rogue Wave Software for sponsoring today's event. And of course, all of our great attendees who hung in with us all the way. So thanks, everyone. Until next time, I'm Dave Rubenstein for SD Times, and so long for now.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.